Here's an interesting question. How do you know if you are going through a spiritual awakening and not a psychosis? Psychosis is often described as losing touch with reality. You can't tell what's real and what's not. It might involve hallucination, like having vivid vision or hearing things that others don't. You might believe things that aren't true. But when you're going through a spiritual awakening, you might also experience something similar. You might have heightened intuition, receiving spiritual downloads or intuitive messages. You might see or hear things which doesn't make much sense to others. So how do you know if you are receiving messages from your higher self or if your mind is playing tricks on you? The first big difference I notice is the connection with reality. People who are spiritually awakened don't actually lose touch with reality. Instead, they develop a much broader perspective. They can see both the physical and spiritual side of things. It's almost like having a dual lens rather than just one limited view. This actually deepens their understanding of themselves and the world. And if you look at spiritual teachers and leaders, they are often very grounded. Psychosis, on the other hand, is when someone loses touch with reality. They are not able to distinguish between what's real and what's not. But when you're in a psychosis, you don't know what's real. And how do you know whether you're in a psychosis? Some people may also argue that reality is subjective and different from each individual. How do we know what reality is? Like, who decide what reality is? And I get what they're saying, but because there are different levels of reality, when we talk about psychosis and being disconnected from reality, we are mostly talking about physical reality. Let me explain. For example, when you see a tree, you can touch it, you can smell it, it's physically there, it exists in the real world. But a hallucination is totally different. It's like you're seeing a tree with eyes, arms, and legs, and it's running towards you and chasing you. That doesn't follow the rules of reality or physical law. Trees doesn't have legs and they definitely don't chase people. Our five senses can confirm this. So that's clearly a hallucination. Another example is if you see everyone's floating around like we're in space. That's a hallucination too. Why? Because it breaks the law of gravity. You know, when you throw something into the air, it's going to come back down. Now, things get a little bit tricky when it comes to perceived reality. Perceived reality is more subjective. For instance, you might think that a tree is tall and old, but someone else might think it's young and short. Sure, you can measure its height or age like 10 meter, 20 meter, 10 years old or 100 years old. But how tall is tall and how old is old? It really depends on your perspective. This is where things get a little gray. And this gray area is where spirituality usually falls under. Spirituality is very subjective. Two people can both be spiritual, but might use different words or terminology to describe the same experiences, or they have completely different perspective. How you see the world really depends on your own experiences and how you interpret them. A lot of it comes down to your vibration and your belief system. For example, if you are in a high vibe and you keep seeing repeated numbers like 111, you might think that is a positive sign, like your angels are with you and new beginnings are coming. But if you are in a fearful and negative state, you might see it as something spooky, like an evil spirit following you. Basically, your emotion and belief shapes how you see the world. We are all entitled to our own beliefs, thoughts, and opinions. Some people may think that the world is dangerous, while others may think it's safe. Different perspective, nothing wrong with that. Spiritually awakened people will see things rather differently from those who aren't, and that's totally fine. The problem only comes when someone tries to convince others that their perspective, their belief is the ultimate truth. If you try to prove your belief to someone, but you don't have any real world evidence to back it up, people may think that you are being unrealistic or even a little delusional. Like if you believe you have some kind of superpower, but you can't really show it, others will see it as a false belief. Actually, when you look at psychics or medium, what they share is often something you can verify in real life. For example, a medium connecting with a loved one who passed might mention their names, the jobs, the personality, hobbies, or memories you share, things you can check with your family. Even when I'm working on my own psychic abilities, I always look for proof to see if I'm accurate or not. Like in one of my videos, I explained how I use my intuition to find my family in a crowded mall, right? It wasn't some random guess. I actually found them using my intuition. I found them. So there's physical proof to me that my intuition is working. However, if you are getting an intuitive message or spiritual download without physical proof, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are in psychosis. It just means that it's unproven. Spiritual awakening and psychic abilities often go beyond the physical world. You may not always have solid evidence to support your insights or your downloads, but that doesn't mean that they are wrong, as there are no proof against them either. It's still valid if it's supported by your own personal experience or aligns with the experience of others who are also spiritually awakened. Even if no one shares your belief, that doesn't mean that it's psychosis, right? At most, it only means that it's delusional. People have different belief all the time. We don't always see the same thing the same way or agree with each other. Just because someone doesn't understand or share your spiritual belief, it doesn't mean that you're wrong or crazy. Psychosis only occurs when beliefs are proven wrong by physical evidence, or when someone validates their perceived reality through hallucination instead of physical reality. For example, a guy might think that people are out there to get him. He saw other people talking badly about him or plotting to poison him. But in reality, those people may not even be talking about him, or they might not even be talking to each other. They don't know each other. People experiencing psychosis usually don't question their own belief. Their hallucination and delusions feel so real to them. They're so convinced they're right that they think it's impossible to be wrong. One time, a stranger stopped me in the park and started talking about how God disapproved a certain group of people. I wouldn't say which group because I don't want to spread discrimination. But he went on to say that they will be burned alive. He said it like he truly believed it, like it was the absolute truth. But what he was sharing was all based on his own perception of reality and his interpretation of Bible verses. On the other hand, someone going through a real spiritual awakening tends to be more open and flexible in their beliefs. They have a sense of discernment and keep a healthy level of skepticism. Even though you might have a heightened intuition and a strong inner knowing, you also understand that the message you receive is filtered through your human mind. Your mind isn't perfect and can misinterpret the message sometimes. You know you are in this like gray area, so you stay open to the possibility that you might be wrong. And sometimes you might even double check yourself. I think here's where a lot of confusion comes in. Checking is when you have a feeling or an insight and you look for physical proof to confirm it. It's different from interpreting things. Interpretation is when you gather information in the physical world and you use it as evidence to back up a belief. For example, let's say you believe someone is your soulmate or your twin flame. You might read blogs or watch video about the signs, and then you pick those signs that matches your belief and conclude that the person is your twin flame. That's interpretation, right? You're taking what you believe as a deep connection you have with someone and interpreting it as them being your soulmate. Now, interpretation can be right or wrong. You may be biased if you only select things that support your belief and ignore those that don't. And that is not the same as checking. Checking is when you take your belief or interpretation and test it to see if it holds up with actual physical evidence. For example, like you ask the universe to give you a specific tangible sign, like a purple monkey, to show up within 24 hours. If you see that purple monkey, if you see that sign, it confirms what you believe. If not, maybe your interpretation was off. There's nothing wrong with interpretation. We do it all the time. All of us perceive the world through our belief system. But when you are spiritually awakened, you leave room for doubt. You understand the insight you receive could be wrong, or it could be your ego playing tricks on you. For example, on my channel, I talk about things like twin flames, past life, and repeating numbers like 111. But I always stay open to the idea that I might not figure it all out. Maybe my friend isn't my twin flame, maybe the past life stuff is just a way for me to process something I need to work through. I keep my mind open as much as possible and ask the universe for clear, tangible signs to confirm if I'm on the right track or if it's just my ego making up a story. Over time, as you grow on your spiritual journey, it will get easier to tell the difference between what's coming from your spirit and what's just your ego talking. But during the initial phase of awakening, it's important to have a healthy level of skepticism and regularly check in with yourself and the universe for confirmation. I wouldn't recommend using psychedelics to induce a spiritual awakening, especially without guidance from a shaman. It can really mess with your brain and distort your perception. Everything feels so real that it's hard to separate physical reality from hallucination. I would rather the spiritual awakening be more gradual and organic. During a spiritual awakening, your third eye and crown chakras open up more, exposing you to a lot of energy. And without a strong root chakra to keep you grounded, it's easier to get thrown off balance. Think of it like a tall tree. If the roots aren't deep enough, the tree won't be able to withstand the strong wind. You can't grow high up without deep roots. The same goes for exploring spiritual realm. If you open up too fast or too much without being grounded, it can lead to something like psychosis. You need that stability, the groundedness to handle the overwhelming energy. Staying grounded in physical reality is essential when exploring higher realms. If you look at the people with spiritual gifts like psychics or mediums, they usually are pretty calm and grounded. If you listen to them talk about how they prepare for their session, they usually do grounding exercise to center themselves first and protect their energy before connecting with the other side. It's a way to stay in control and not get swept by everything they experience from the other side. When I went through my own spiritual awakening, the first thing I was drawn to was actually mindfulness. It helped me to stabilize and stay connected to the physical reality. Once I felt more present and balanced, I naturally became more interested in New Age practices and started noticing more synchronicities. That gradual progression allowed me to bridge both the physical reality and the spiritual realm without getting carried away. Spiritual awakening to me is about connecting the heaven and earth. Like physical reality, yes, it doesn't tell the full picture, but it's not about escaping or denying physical reality either. It's about finding harmony between the two. Let's dive into this topic a little bit more because it's important not just for your mental health and spiritual growth, but also for figuring out how reliable the spiritual information you're taking in really is. Like these days, with so many videos on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, how do you know if the person sharing their spiritual wisdom is genuinely awakened or confused, or maybe even experiencing something like psychosis? Like I've said, spirituality is super subjective. It covers everything from mindfulness to new age belief. And now, literally, anyone can just share their thoughts online. That's why having some discernment and a bit of healthy skepticism is more important than ever. But you can't also rely purely on your critical thinking. Some things goes beyond what the mind can fully understand. That's where the intuition and your body comes in. Your body has its own wisdom. If you are receiving so-called messages from the higher realm or from someone else, check in with yourself. How does it feel in the body? What's the vibe? If something feels off, chances are it's not a genuine spiritual download. When guidance comes from a higher realm, it always feels neutral, loving, and supportive. It doesn't evoke fear and anxiety, and it will never tell you to hurt yourself or anyone else. Never. It also won't make you feel paranoid, like thinking someone is out there to get you or that you are in some kind of danger. Even if it's trying to steer you away from someone or something dangerous, it'll just give you a nudge or a clear direction like turn left, turn right, go this way instead. It won't make someone an enemy and create separation. Most of the time, it wouldn't even explain why, it wouldn't give you a reason. You'll just feel that something isn't right here, the vibe is off, and you need to go another way. Or even if you receive a negative vision of a future event like a precondition, it feels more like a download of information rather than a fear inducing warning. You won't have a voice telling you things like the world is going to end, you're doomed. That voice is not from the higher realm. For a spiritual download, you just get an image of the future event, usually without clear instruction on what to do about it. Or you'll get something symbolic that may not make much sense to the limited mind. It's mostly pretty neutral, and what you want to do with the information is really up to you. However, it's not always easy to tell the difference, especially when you are going through a tough time during a spiritual awakening. When you're feeling depressed, your thoughts tends to lean into that depression, making it harder for you to hear your higher self. Your mind might start making things up. That's why it's so important not to believe everything your mind tells you, especially in those moments. I remember right before my first spiritual awakening, I went through what some people call dark night of the soul. I was feeling so restless, so I decided to take a walk at the neighborhood park. Out of nowhere, I heard this voice that says, "Jump into the river and be one with it." Now, oneness is something my soul desires, deeply desire and crave. And yes, the river did feels very peaceful, calm, and kind of alluring. But in that moment, my mind twisted it into something else. Thankfully, I snapped out of that trance pretty quickly and sat down on a nearby bench. That's when I heard another voice, something that is louder and clearer this time. It says, "Connect with your purpose. You didn't come here to die like this. Write a book about your experience." And that's when I realized the first voice and the second voice were not the same. Your spirit is so much more creative and expansive than your limited mind. It can come up with ideas and solutions your mind just can't see. It will never ever suggest hurting yourself or anyone else to fix a problem. Your higher self will never tell you to attack others or tear down the system. For example, if you feel that the government is not working for you, your higher self might just guide you to move to another country, to somewhere else. If the 9 to 5 grind isn't for you, it might nudge you to explore and create your own career path. But it's not going to tell you to bring down the system because that's not your job. Systems naturally fall apart when people start supporting them. By fighting the system, you actually end up more trapped by it. People going through psychosis often get stuck in lower vibration like fear, anger, depression, or even revenge. Usually, but not always the case, sometimes they might just feel emotionally numb. The mind can also create a distorted reality to cope with the feeling of fear and anger, often masking it as joy, bliss, or love. They might think that they are in a joyful and peaceful place, but vibration wise, they are not matching up to what they are portraying. So whenever you're watching content online, it's always a good idea to do a vibe check. Like ask yourself, how grounded is this person? What kind of energy are they giving off? Like does this resonate with my higher self or not? Not everyone with a lower vibration is in psychosis, of course. Some might just be in the middle of their healing journey, working through their trauma and old wounds. But always check in with your higher self and intuition. Even with the stuff I'm sharing here, you don't have to agree 100%. Check it against your own intuition and your own experiences. Another difference is the level of control you still have. For people experiencing psychosis, they don't usually question their belief or check them against reality because their mind is fully or mostly in control. They believe everything that the mind tells them is true. There's no gap between their mind and their deeper awareness or their observer self. They haven't lost their mind, they just gotten lost in their own mind. On the other hand, during a spiritual awakening, there is a clear space between the true self, the observer, and the mind. There's a gap. You don't blindly believe everything your mind tells you. You understand that you are not your mind or your thoughts. This gap is needed for discernment. Spiritual awakening creates this space where you can see things more clearly. Even if you receive an intuitive message, you don't have to follow it or do anything about it. You still have a choice. You still have autonomy. You can take a longer or more challenging path is if that's what you want. It might not be the path of least resistance or what your soul suggests, but it's your choice, it's your call. When you are in psychosis, though, the mind creates so much fear, uncertainty, and paranoia that it feels like there's no choice but to listen to the mind. When you are at your most vulnerable state, you are also the most impressionable. I'm not a mental health professional, so I'm not giving any mental health advice here. But if you are going through a tough time, whether is it a dark period in your spiritual awakening or distress from psychosis, please consider reaching out for help. It could mean seeing a medical profession like a therapist or connecting with a spiritual teacher or mentor. It would be even better if you could find someone that is familiar with both psychology and spirituality. Then you will get the best of both worlds. Spiritual awakening can feel like a curse sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. Watch this next video to find out more.